Well, like I say, welcome everybody. If you can see this, hopefully you can see the first slide. It's a nice image. It's nice to start with a beautiful picture, so I thought it would be nice to share one of our businesses as a photograph to show you one of our operators. It's actually, I don't know if you can guess where it is, but if you see on the horizon, actually those mountains you can see on the horizon is Skye, and we're on the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, which is on the west coast of Scotland. We're looking down at a little business in the bottom left corner, which is Glenelg Inn, arguably the greenest inn in the UK, won lots of awards. They have a gold award with green tourism, and they're doing a lot to reduce their carbon footprint and to celebrate the different green activities you can do in the area. They do things like sea kayaking, all sorts of different things, and they've really, really made their inn a really successful business in the tourism side. What's interesting when I look at a picture like this, I see a business that's really kind of focused on being green, but it also reminds me that the amount of carbon that's associated with staying in this business, so you would use the same amount of carbon staying in this Glenelg Inn for over a year as you would the amount of carbon you use to fly across the Atlantic and back. So it just gives an impression of the scale of the problem we're facing, the opportunities that what a really green business can do, and this business has a carbon footprint of about between 10% to 20% of what an average business would be. So they've really reduced their carbon footprint a lot by doing a lot of the good practices we're going to talk about today. But it also shows that travel is actually a big issue that we've also got to tackle. There are some new elements coming in where they're talking about electric planes and things like that, but they're still many years away. So we do have to think about how we can manage the carbon associated with travel, with the accommodation that people stay in, to obviously maintain and preserve and to have a really really vibrant and a positive relationship with our planet Earth. So we use the strapline People, Places, Planet, and that's how we explain our green objectives and framework in terms of moving forward as a business. If you don't know about green tourism, this webinar isn't specifically on the green tourism program. If you want to know more, please register with us. Contact the office, the website. If you just Google green tourism, you'll find our website. It's green-tourism.com. We have a team of membership team and assessor team who help to guide you through the process and to learn more about what green tourism is. I'm going to mention a few things about it, but if you want to know more detail, to say, please let us know on the questions, and we'll help you out on that process. Okay, I'll move on to the next slide. So yes, I mentioned our mission, People, Places, Planet. This is just a picture of our team. We have a team of 5 assessors. We go out on the road. We're visiting businesses to help them on the journey. So that's part of our process. So we're looking to see how you're doing. You get a bronze, silver, or gold award for the positive actions you place. And as you do specific actions, you get credit, and that helps you move forward with the framework. So like I say, I'm not going to go details into the framework. Many of you will know it already as part of green tourism. But if you want to know more, please let us know, and we can send you our checklists and guide you through the process. And there's a couple of tools and so on that we can talk you through as well. Okay, facing the sort of carbon challenge. I don't know if you've seen this graph before, but it was in The Inconvenient Truth, which is when Al Gore did a movie about the state of the planet back in around about 2005. These are the carbon emissions that we've had since 1750 going through up until the year 2000, and you can see the speed at which we've been increasing our carbon footprint has just been really drastic. And it looks very doom and gloom, and I think on one level we do have to recognize that we are facing a really difficult challenge, but at the same time I'm hopeful that what we can do today is also show you not only are we beginning to face it and starting to turn the corner, but some of the businesses and hopefully you guys as well will really be able to lead this change and really make a difference. So we've seen the last 15 years, 14 have been the hottest on record since 2001. Obviously, this year has been quite an interesting year with the whole El Nino effect. We've had more forest fires, both in Borneo, in Canada and America. California had some serious forest fires. Europe's had forest fires. Africa's had forest fires as well in the Congo and so on, which is not widely reported. So we've seen those sorts of things. We've also had 2 big hurricanes, which got a lot of media coverage the last in a month, so that's quite drastic. And we're also seeing a loss of biodiversity, and that's another issue that we need to tackle, as well as the carbon. They do kind of connect. But I mean, if you're looking at things like biodiversity, if you remember as a child probably driving through the countryside with your parents, you might remember, you know, getting insects flying onto the windscreen. You might remember seeing lots of moths and such like in night lights and so on. These days, you see a lot less insects, and I think that's something that we can all remember. Certainly, people of my age, and like I say, I'm in my 50s now, so I can certainly recognise that the last 40 years we've seen some drastic things, and we need to change. And these are all parts of being the positive future that we want. Is if we work together, we can tackle it and celebrate a greener future. So that was a bit of doom and gloom, but I here want to just show you the trajectory and where we're moving forward. If you look on the left-hand side of the graph, that shows up to the year 2000, and that's the carbon emissions going up and up and up to that high point. But if you look at the actual stats from 2000, and these figures come from the Tyndall Centre, which is a climate research centre based in Manchester University, and you can see that by 2010 we started levelling off in terms of the carbon emissions that we had globally, so that's a positive sign. And since 2010 we had a recession, but 2000, and I think it was 2015-16, was the first year where we saw a global reduction in carbon emissions whilst also seeing economic growth. And that's the beginning of the indications to show what is called a sort of decoupling, so that we can have economic growth and the sort of success we want in the future, but we don't have to be reliant on ever-increasing carbon emissions. So that's a really positive sign, and something we should build on and something we should celebrate. It's not widely promoted because obviously media like to tell us always the bad news, but there is some good news out there, so we just need to keep on that journey. The graph shows 2 areas, A and B. If we do less in the next 10 years and we don't really reduce our carbon emissions, we end up having to do more in the following 20 to 30 years. If by 2050 we're only going to see a 2-degree temperature rise. So that graph is really indicating the journey we need to be on to achieve only a 2-degree temperature rise globally. The marbled area on the left-hand side of the graph is the amount of carbon we've already used, and the area in white underneath on the right-hand side is the amount of carbon budget we've got left. So you can see we really need to get active. The less we do now, also you can see that that graph becomes steeper, and the steeper that graph becomes, the more painful the changeover to be a low-carbon society is going to be. And that might mean we can't have some of the luxuries that we like to think we have. You know, people might have to curb the amount of flying they do. They might have to curb, you know, the kind of food we eat and how we eat things, and you know, and it could even mean sort of things like ecological collapse and so on, which would cause really drastic changes to people's lifestyles and so on. So we don't want to have that kind of future. So we really need to get active and work together to make a difference. And what I wanted to show you is just a little bit of information about what we've been doing in green tourism over the last 10 years. We've been working with the Carbon Toolkit. We started collecting information in 2010 on businesses' carbon emissions, and from 2010 to by the time of 2015, so in the year of 2015, we looked at the carbon dioxide emissions per guest in our accommodation, and compared to a baseline in 2010, we'd save 295,000 tons of carbon dioxide, which is lots of people saving a few tons here and a few hundred tons there, and all of us added together made a good difference. 295,000 tons carbon dioxide is the same as 15,000 Americans would use in a year, or 30,000 Brits in a year, or amazingly even 4.2 million Ethiopians. So it shows you 2 things. One is that we can make a real difference, but also the second thing is it also shows us that the people who need to make the difference are us Europeans, North Americans. You know, we're the bigger carbon consumers, and therefore we've got the biggest opportunity to make a real difference. And it's only 5% of the world population that really needs to change their habits, because the other 95% of the population only use a tenth of the carbon that we use. Our goal is to save 1 million tonnes of carbon dioxide by 2020, and we'd love you to join in with our process to do it. You don't have to be a Green Tourism member to work with us on doing this. You only need to register with us to use the carbon tool that we have, and I'm going to show you how simple it is to measure your carbon and to get on this journey of understanding what your footprint is and also what positive things you can do and make that difference. And like I say, we can target big objectives like 1 million tonnes. Okay, so I did mention the Green Tourism program. I'm just going to cover a little bit about that if you don't know about it. It's a program that's been going since 1997, so we're on our 20th anniversary. It's our focus originally was very much on helping reduce operating costs. Obviously, energy is a big cost for the hospitality sector. It's the second largest cost after the wages bill. So it's a really big cost, but at the same time, it's a big opportunity. So transforming your business to be a low carbon business makes really good economic sense. And increasingly, customers are interested in it. So they want businesses and consumers want to use responsible businesses. So it's a really good marketing tool to help you tell your story and to show how genuine you are on that side of things. We're seeing a lot more interest from the corporate booking side. I was doing a presentation yesterday to a conference of event managers, very interested in choosing greener places to stay and venues to use for their bookings, want to know more about the carbon as well, and they want to take their responsibility forward because, of course, if they're doing events, there's a lot of travel, there's a lot of carbon, and there's a lot of issues to do with where people stay. And it's increasingly to help the discerning customer. The green label helps to show the discerning customer that businesses really care and they are doing positive things. And we have 3 levels to our program, very much because it is a process of transition. We're helping everyone sort of transition. So even if you're starting at bronze, you can move forward to silver and gold. We update our criteria every 5 years, so we keep moving things forward. So just like the Olympics, you know, we're looking to get to progress every time and see new businesses succeed and do well. We have a framework. I say I won't go into all the details of what's in the framework, but it covers energy, waste, water, communication, travel, nature and culture, things like that. So all the elements that would relate to running your business successfully, and it's all about positive actions. As you do positive actions, you build some points up, and as you build the points up, you obviously get the prizes, which are the bronze, silver and gold award. And we're looking about 50 to 60 measures for each business. Smaller businesses do have fewer choices, and larger businesses can do a little bit more, so we look at 60 in those operations. Okay, that's enough about green tourism. If you want to find out more about the program, you can get a free health check. So we do a green health check. We're offering that as a free service. So just send an inquiry through to greentourism.com, and we'll help you through the process, talk you through about what you're doing already. Many businesses think they're not doing very much, or tell me, oh well, I've got an old oil boiler, or I'm this, how can I be green? And in actual fact, you often find they're doing a lot of really positive things, whether it's food and drink or encouraging customers to walk and cycle and things like that. So everyone's doing some positive things, and it's about banking them and building on them for the future. If you want to know about membership fees, the membership fees to join are between £100 and £700 a year based upon the business size. So we're relatively cost effective in terms of the costs we have. We're a non-profit program, so that's how we operate. We do appointments. We do the grading visit within 4 weeks of you having an appointment with us, and then you receive your plaque and a media pack of how to promote and help you promote your business to the consumer. And we're doing more things. If you look on our website, we've got some really nice videos. We're developing more video tools. So if you're looking to do video and want to work with us on that, we can develop that and help celebrate the positive actions that you're doing. Right, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the carbon tool, about the carbon calculator. If you haven't used it before, it's relatively straightforward. You can register online as a non-member. There's a registration. You have to provide us your email. We have to do that so we can trace where we're getting the energy information from, so we can make sure we know who members are and who non-members are, so we know what their energy is. But once you've done that, you can be registered with us. If you're a member, you get a membership code as well. So if you're part of Green Tourism, you get a membership code and you get help on that. And of course, we've got a team of staff in our office who are here to help you walk through the process. But what I'm going to show you today is just how straightforward it is. You only need 5 things, which is why I show the picture of the hand. There's just 5 elements that you need, essentially, to be able to work out your carbon footprint. One is the kilowatt hours of electricity, and hopefully the tariff, the source of electricity that you have, because each different electricity supplier has different carbon metrics, and we are able to make that allowance. If you don't know your supplier, it doesn't matter, you can still work with it. You can just use an average, which is the UK average emission, which is based upon the Department of the Environment figures, DEFRA's figures, but you need to know your annual kilowatt hours of electricity, and you can get that from your electricity supplier easily enough. And again, if you've got some bills and you want some help, just give us a call so we can help you on that. Second element is your gas consumption, obviously your main heating fuel, so that might be oil or gas. If you know the gas consumption in litres, if it's bottled gas, or kilowatt hours, then you can put that figure in. Again, an annual figure, that's all we need. There's some ready reckoners to help you do some conversions to convert litres into kilowatt hours, so that's easy. And that's on the tool as well. It's just a simple choice. I'll show you in a moment. The floor area, that's probably the only thing that might take a little time for you if you haven't done it before. If you've got a rates bill, then it often has your floor area on your rates bill. If not, then you might need to do a little bit of work just to get your floor area. But of course, once you've measured it, it's there forever. It's not going to change unless you do extensions and so on. So that's quite straightforward. The floor area is your heated floor area. That's what we need to know, the area that you would have as space heating and so on. So if you have lots of outbuildings and things like that, don't worry, they don't need to be included. But we need the floor area, and don't forget, it isn't just the ground floor area, it's the number of stories as well. And again, we have a little tool that if you know the length and width of your building and the number of stories, it'll just calculate the floor area for you, so that's straightforward. And we need it in square meters, and that's the only other thing to bear in mind, not square feet, so just try and make sure we're working on metric figures. For occupancy, just to know your bed nights, so if you're accommodation, knowing your bed nights, your room nights or bed nights, that can be put into the figures, so just knowing your annual figures on that. Again, there's a tool to help if you don't know the bed nights, but you do know your percent occupancy, and I'll mention that. If you're a conference centre, then you might have figures on the number of delegates. If you don't worry, the carbon calculator isn't using a delegate number to work out your carbon footprint. It uses a CO2 per square metre, so it doesn't need delegates if you don't have it, so don't worry too much on that. If you've got water consumption, so if you're on a water meter, then provide that figure. That will help as well. It's not absolutely vital. Water isn't a massive carbon footprint, but it is something that if you are measuring it, it's good to manage it, and therefore it's good to have it in the tool. And our updated tools are going to probably look at doing a water benchmarking, so it will provide some guidance for you on where you sit compared to other businesses in terms of water consumption going forward. So that hopefully shows you how sort of simple it is, and then from it we end up with things like a CO2 figure per bed night, which allows us to see how we're moving forward on increasing our bed nights but also reducing our carbon, and either one of those will have a factor of reducing your carbon footprint. So it's really fun once you get going with it, or at least I find it fun anyway, but I'm a bit of a carbon geek anyway, so but anyway, okay, this is just showing you the carbon calculator step 1. This is a screen grab, so this is what the actual tool looks like. It's quite simple. You choose on, you can see it puts the report year, the membership code, the business name. That's all pre-populated for you. You have to choose what type of business you are, so you have a drop-down list of different types of businesses. And in this example, I've chosen a hotel with resort, but you have offices, cafes, restaurants, visitor attractions, different types of hotels, budget hotels, bed and breakfast, guest house. They're all in there. You'll see it on the drop down. So choose the one that's most relevant to you. Put in your total number of bedrooms. Put in your total number of room nights. You can see underneath there, there's a little click link. If you want to click on there, you can calculate your room nights based upon your percentage occupancy, so it'll multiply your bedrooms by the number of days you're open by the percentage occupancy, and it'll estimate a total number of bed nights for you, so you can work it out that way. But most businesses do tend to measure their room nights annually anyway, so again, it's a figure that you should have available. If you've got a set conference centre, you can put in your delegates. If you've got staff who live on site, so they're part of your energy bill, then you can factor that. That includes staff accommodation, or it might include owners in a bed and breakfast and so on. So again, there's a tool there to help you if you want to calculate your staff room nights. If you know you're staying in your own B&B so many nights a year, then it'll work out the room nights that would be based upon that, and it adds all that together to give you a total number of room nights. If you want to do vehicles, then you've also got an option there, more relevant for tour operators, for businesses that have vehicles, but it is available if you really want it. Moving on to the next step, step 2, we want your floor area. Like I said, there's a little tool there to help you calculate square meters if you need it. You can put in the meeting space area in terms of square meters. That's your internal square meterage. So if you have a 50 square meter conference meeting room, then you can put that in as your meeting space area, and it allows you to understand what that proportion of your energy is likely to be associated with that space. Whereas the overall floor area of the building is generally the external floor area, so it's if you haven't measured it, then you might need a tape measure or to look at your architectural plans, or maybe even a fire plan can help you calculate your floor areas. So just using that in a ruler, knowing your scale is quite straightforward. But again, we can help you on the phone with that. Kilowatt hours consumption in gas, kilowatt hours bottled gas consumption in kilowatt hours, and again, if you need help calculating it, there's a click link there which gives you some little tools. You can put in other fuels as well, so you've got everything from coal to wood if you are using wood. If it's only in a small usage, it's not going to make a big difference to the overall figures, so don't worry if you just use 1 bag of coal a year or something. You can put it in, but it's not going to drastically change the figures anyway. And wood, we use the factors associated with DEFRA to do the conversion of wood into how many kilowatt hours that is and how many kilograms of CO2 impact that has as well. But I won't go into that. Electricity, if you've got any questions about wood, just ping us a question through the session and we can answer it at the end. So if you're on biomass or other things, we can help you on that side of things. Electricity consumption, it's considered a Scope 2 emission, but I'm not going to go into all that. But it's the way that the world regulates carbon emissions. It's the different emissions are classed as different scopes. So we ask it as a different step in the journey. But if you can put in your electricity consumption, if you need help with the kilowatt hours, you might know your unit price and you might know your total cost. So you can use that to help estimate your kilowatt hours consumption. So again, getting an annual figure of that is relatively straightforward, and you can see the second figure down there where it says UK average. That's the UK average emission, so you can use that for working out your carbon associated with the energy you consume in the UK. If you know your individual tariff, then you can use the drop-down list. It's got all the main tariffs that are supplied in the UK on that drop-down, about 25 different suppliers. Includes some suppliers that have got 0 carbon, so someone like Good Energy or Ecotricity, very low carbon impact. So again, it's a way in which you can, by choosing a different renewable supplier, you can choose a greener option and thereby reduce your carbon footprint. If you do produce electricity, like have a solar panel or something like a PV panel, you can export energy and you can put that figure in if you want, and you can put in other things like district heating and so on if you're on unusual things, but they don't come up very often. Water consumption, it just asks you there what your cubic meter of water is, and you can put those figures in as well, and it asks you about sewage. So if you're on main supply, it factors in that, and if you're on a private supplier with your own water treatment system, like a Clargester or whatever, it'll account for that as well. So it's a clever tool. It's relatively simple, and once you've worked through it, it produces this certificate. This certificate shows you the last few years, so you can see in this site they've put in figures for both 2015 and 2016, and you can go back as far as you like. You can go right back to 2010 if you want with us. You can put in historical information if you want, just so you can see how you tracked over the years. The graph, the certificate shows you the last 3 years. It always shows you up to 3 years on the graph. It can't show more than 3 years. But like you can see on this example, you can see on the bar charts how they've reduced from 35 to 29, so they've saved over 10% of their carbon footprint, and they're on a really positive journey. They're considered against benchmarks, and that's what the column on the left-hand side is there for, with the red, orange, green, and blue elements. Red is for poor or high consumption, orange is for fair consumption, green is for good consumption in terms of being quite efficient, and blue is for excellent. And you can see excellent is just a thin slither at the bottom, but it's us aiming towards 0 carbon emissions per overnight or very low kilowatt-hour figures per square meter. So that's to help you move forward. On the lower half of the graph, the chart, you can see their kilowatt-hour consumption per square meter is 281 kilowatt hours per square meter. That's pretty good for a hotel. That's quite good. But to get really good, we were trying to get businesses under 200. 200 is a good objective for most businesses to try and aim towards. Obviously, it depends completely on the facilities you've got. If you've got swimming pools, leisure centres, big atriums, large dining halls, restaurants, all these things are different things which can affect it, so you have to be aware that it depends on the type of services you provide. And it gives you a total at the bottom there in the yellow, the total net CO2 emissions in tons. That figure of kilowatt hours per square meter is quite a good measure. If you think about your miles per gallon for a car, the equivalent for a building is your kilowatt hours per square meter, and most people would know what their kilograms of CO2, their miles per gallon for their car is, but how many businesses really know what their kilowatt hours per square meter for their building is? And yet that can be a much bigger carbon footprint than the amount of energy you use for your carbon. Oh, right, okay, I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to rattle on. We've got some benchmarks there. If you want to see the benchmarks, just keep in touch and we can show you those going forward. I'm going to quickly mention the Event Manager tool. So this is if you're looking at planning events. We have a new tool. We're piloting it over the winter. Aim to promote it and release it in the spring. It allows you to measure your fuel. So if you're putting on an event, how far you've traveled for an event, the accommodation you've stayed in. So you can see we've got figures for different sites. So you can use our database to find out the accommodation you're staying in and how much carbon they use, how much the venue consumes if you're picking a conference center and so on. And again, it's a part of our database. And you can then look at balancing those carbon emissions with things like rainforest protection and doing projects. We're working in Zimbabwe. I don't know if you know, but Green Tourism has been working in Zimbabwe for a couple of years. So we're quite excited about how positive things are moving forward in that country as well at the moment. So that's great. And you can sponsor solar panels for providing community water projects, and that's with Environment Africa. And we also work with the Woodland Trust, which is the tree planting in the UK. I won't go through that. On the carbon calculator, you have the option to choose events, so you can organize an event and put in your figures. This is just the drop down showing you the travel, so showing you the different emissions associated with the different ways you travel. If you're putting in figures on travel, you need to know the number of people traveling and the distance you're traveling. And remember, it's not just getting there, it's getting back as well. So you need to think about the journey to and from. So, and you just put in the figure as the crow flies. You can use Google to give you a mileage figure, so it's quite easy to work out based upon where you're traveling to, so that's quite straightforward. You can choose different accommodations. So again, you've got up to 5 accommodations. You can choose number of nights, number of rooms, and it uses the carbon figures that we've got on our businesses to measure that. If you're not using a Green Tourism registered property, we have averages for non-GTBS members as well, and we have international averages if you're using accommodation overseas. You can see on the drop down at the bottom there's the venue. We've chosen Oxford University there, one of our members there, and how much space they've used. And you can book in how long you're using, so you know the venue area that you're booking, and you can put in how long you're staying in that accommodation or how long you're using that venue for. And you can be anything from half a day all the way up to 2 or 3 days, even a week if you've got a long event. But half a day is the shortest time because it takes a while to set up a meeting and a while to close it down. So even if you've only got a meeting for an hour, we still work on the basis that the smallest amount of time you'd book a space is half a day. Then it gives you some overall figures: travel, your stay, your venue, gives you a total carbon figure. You can then work on reducing that carbon by planting trees, looking at sponsoring rainforest and so on with the projects that we work with, and then it gives you an overall figure on whether you've been a net carbon absorber or a net carbon user, so you can use that to offset. Again, if you got any questions on offsetting, please send them through as we're going through today. I can answer them, and any of the partners that we work with, like I said, the World Land Trust, who are doing a lot of work with rainforest. Examples: this is just the EICC in Scotland. They've reduced their carbon by 47% through doing energy saving projects, and they've gone down from 350 kilowatt hours per square meter down to 210 kilowatt hours, so they really moved forward. They're not an old building, but there's still lots of potential. They've done lots with LED lighting, lots with temperature controls, simple controls. Alex is going to mention a few of the tips and hints you can do on that a bit later. Crystal, this is just another example. They real eco build. They even have lighting which is triggered by your feet as you walk across panels, across the flooring. It provides the kinetic energy to power the lighting. It's a great place to visit. It's a visitor attraction as well as a conference centre, so definitely if you're in London, I'd recommend going there. And they've got their carbon performance down to being excellent. So they've got under 100 kilowatt hours per square metre. So it shows you it is possible to do these things. And even older buildings, we've got the likes of Chatsworth and Blenheim Palace and Balmoral, all businesses that are historical buildings, but they're doing real positive things, and even they can make a difference. Often they don't have lots of air conditioning, so they can be quite efficient from some of the sort of Victorian style designs and so on they might have followed as well. So everyone can do things. This is the Metropolitan. It just shows you an example of a hotel. They've got their kilograms of CO2 down from 60, which is quite high, down to 33, and based on 40,000 bed nights, which is their annual bed nights numbers, they have saved over 1,000 tons of carbon dioxide. So it just shows you that million can be broken down into a number of businesses saving 100 here or 1,000 there, make a real difference. Obviously, green tourism isn't just about carbon, it is about other things like free-range eggs and social welfare and sustainable timber, all positive things to help make a more greener future, but not ones that we measure the carbon figures for, because it would get too complicated and it would continuously be changing depending on different suppliers and things like that. So we work on you mainly on your energy bill and your water consumption, which are you metered. Close to the end, so I had to rush off quickly. I was going a bit slow there, but we've been working 20 years. We're in a movement for change. We're really doing a lot of positive things now in terms of telling stories, sharing our stories, getting more interest. The consumer's really there now, a lot more than they were when we first started 20 years ago. We'd really love you to be part of the process. If you are part of the process, I hope you enjoy being part of green tourism, and if there's more that you want us to do, just keep in touch. You've got my email there at the bottom, John@Green This is a nice example of one of our gold businesses, the Wesley, a really nice hotel near Euston Station. I'm on the sleeper tonight, and if you do come down to London, or you're travelling from London, the Wesley is very close to Euston Station, so it's a great place to stop on the journey and so on. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. I'm going to hand on to Alex, who's going to rattle through the next step of the process and the Green Business Fund and some other tips and hints of how to save energy and reduce your carbon footprint. So thank you.
Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Alessandro Ciampechini. I'm part of the technical team at the Carbon Trust. I work for the business services team. And today I'll try to give you an overview of on how to save some energy within the hospitality sector, and also I will present some case studies from the Green Business Fund. That is a scheme we've been running for 1.5 years now, and I'll give you some more detail of the scheme that can deliver some support to you. For those who don't know, the Carbon Trust, essentially we are a not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to accelerate the move to a sustainable and low-carbon economy. We are an independent organization, and essentially we deliver advice to businesses, government, and the public sector within the low-carbon world. We measure footprinting, and also we help develop new low-carbon technologies for, again, private and public sector. Again, I think we can move to this. I'm going to now give you an overview of the typical breakdown of the energy consumption within a typical hotel. This is taken from the CIPSE Guide F that essentially gives you a benchmark, a breakdown of the typical consumption of electricity and gas, fossil fuels, include everything, of a typical hotel with no air conditioning. As we can see on the electricity side, we can see that lighting and refrigeration takes most of the consumption. Obviously, there are some other fields that consume energy, but we need to be very focused on lighting and ventilation. And also, if we look at the heating side, the fossil fuel side, obviously we can see that 70% of it is just due to the heating and hot water. So there's plenty of opportunity to save energy on the heating side and hot water, especially through maybe just changing some settings or just setting some controls. This is just a chart that gives you, obviously, any type of action you take to save energy has got an impact at the site, but also has got a cost, potentially no cost for some easy action like changing and improving staff awareness or just setting energy policy or strategy at the site. These obviously are very low cost, but can have a very big impact to change how people consume energy. This is just hosts or even staff and all people that work on site. Obviously, there are some other type of intervention like upgrading the lighting, installing some sub-metering and controls, cogeneration, renewable energy. Obviously, have got higher capex, but can deliver a longer-term benefit to the building. Now, if we start with the very low cost or no cost action, we say quick win action. There's some, opportunity to save energy on hospitality sites. So if we look at the 4 actions I've put on the slide, obviously you can save money through energy procurement. Energy procurement is just try to get a cheaper tariff. Obviously, this can deliver good savings. Another type of committing to energy awareness and saving energy is to set an energy policy and energy strategy on site. This can deliver up to 10% cost reduction. We've audited since we've been set around 35,000 buildings in the UK. So we've seen that through this historical data that up to 10% energy can be saved just changing and increasing awareness of people on site. So setting switch off campaigns on the lighting system, so switch off the lights when it's not needed, or just ensuring that you've set the right temperature within a different type of rooms. Then we'll have a look at what's the best temperature, the target temperature for each room on the hotels. And then obviously, even for those of you who have got a kitchen on site, is quite important even to look after kitchen and catering equipment and also switching off equipment when you don't need it. Obviously, a maintenance program is quite crucial to look after any type of system that consumes energy. So from the boiler system, heating system, potential cooling system, it's quite important to have a good maintenance program on site to keep the equipment working properly. Some very no-cost action can be, just as you can see from the slide, if you just decrease by 1 degree Celsius temperature, you can save up to 8% on fuel consumption, and this can be a massive saving at the end of the year, and this can be just profit for the organization. Also, we've seen in many cases that if your boiler is maintained poorly or not maintained at all, it can increase the cost of heating by even 15%. So again, I just want to stress this, that maintenance on boiler systems and heating systems in general is quite crucial. Also, this is another example, is to look at the position of thermostats. So ideally, it should be around 1.5 meters from the floor. So obviously, if the sensors are just near the floor or near the ceiling, obviously they take a temperature that is not the right temperature that you need to keep in a room or in a dining room or in a conference room. So again, those are very no-cost actions that can deliver massive savings in the end. If we now move to a longer-term solution that usually come with a payback between 1 and 3 years, we've seen that the impact of those could be to deliver up to 20-25%, but in some cases it can go even to 35% if the right conditions are met. So there are many examples of those medium-term solutions for a typical hospitality site. So obviously LED lighting is just makes sense at the moment because you can reduce energy consumption of the lighting system up to 60-65%, especially if you install lighting sensors and occupancy sensors, so you can switch off the lights in rooms where there are no people, or in dining rooms or corridors. So sensors are quite important as well. And obviously LED lighting have got a lifespan of 50,000 hours and more. So LED lighting is one of the technology that is can deliver very good benefits to the organization. Obviously, if we look at the HVAC, so heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, all is around, if we look at expensive investment, all is around controls, thermostats, and obviously choosing the right settings. And maybe if you have got already a BMS, looking after the BMS can be very important to set the right temperature. So there's this table on the slide that's essentially is taken from environmental design of SIPSI Guide A that sets the target temperature that you should keep in different room types. So obviously if you overheat the room, obviously you're going to face higher consumption and as a consequence higher running costs of the structure. So have a look if you can at your BMS, at your thermostats, because they can make a real difference in terms of energy consumption. And also catering is quite important, raising awareness of kitchen staff and creating a switch-off policy is very important. And also obviously if you have to buy a new equipment, please take into account the life cycle cost and the energy efficiency of the unit you are going to purchase, because in the long term can deliver more savings than maybe a standard unit. Again, just related to the air conditioning and the heating, this is just an example of two myths that, for example, many people think that leaving air conditioning on overnight reduces energy costs. This is obviously not true, because obviously you are going to face higher energy consumption than necessary. You just can slow down the air conditioning during the night, or just if you have got the right sensors, the system can do it by itself. Or also just turning air conditioning as low as they can is not making, can not deliver any benefit. Actually, it can create the opposite, so just creating very uncomfortable conditions for occupants, and also is it most of times worth just keeping air conditioning on at a lower or higher temperature, depending on if it's heating or cooling, rather than just setting as low as it can be done. Now, if we look at the third section, so longer term solutions for the building, we've got again many opportunities that if we look at the heating system, we can, if you have to replace the boiler, maybe if the boiler is dead or if it's approaching end of life, you can think about heat pumps. Heat pumps are getting very efficient at the moment. Air source or ground source heat pump can be a good compromise. Obviously, it could require an important investment, but again, if you look at the longer term, it might be convenient. Also, if we think about replacing boilers just with another boiler, obviously a condensing boiler can save at least 20% of gas consumption. If we look at, for example, a 15 years old boiler. Another thing to look at, especially for structures that and buildings that have got, for example, a swimming pool or leisure center. So CHP is obviously combined heat and power, is a technology that delivers electricity and hot water and heating. So if you have a combined requirement at the same time of heating and electricity, CHP, micro CHP potentially could be a good way to save energy. We've seen that when all the conditions are met and the operating hours are set appropriately, you can save even 30% of your energy. And also CHP, good quality CHP, that means that the CHP unit has to be efficient. The efficient can qualify for the enhanced capital allowances, so some fiscal benefits for you. And obviously, if we look at renewables, solar PV is always the way to save electricity on site. Obviously, we are very aware of there's not much incentive from the feed-in tariff at the moment, but if you look at the price per kilowatt installed, it's nearly half if you compare it to 2 or 3 years ago. So obviously the market followed this reduction in the feed-in tariff, so it's still convenient in the long term, obviously, as long as the technical condition for installing PV are good. Obviously, this is strategic investment, a long-term investment. A PV system can last for 20-25 years. So on the roof, so it's, as I say, a long-term investment, but can improve the efficiency of the building in a very good way. Another long-term investment could be to improve the building fabric of a building, if possible. This would deliver savings on the heating and cooling, but again, it's a more complex action, and you can think about this if you, for example, are going to refurbish the building. Now I'm going to present some case studies coming from the Green Business Fund. So essentially, under the Green Business Fund, we deliver 3 types of services. So one is the implementation advice, that essentially is technical support to companies. In this case, for this client, charity center, leisure and events and charity center, we have them choose the right supplier and the right solution for their lighting system. So they wanted to upgrade the existing fluorescent fittings to LED. So we can see there was 134 fittings. Based on our support and the best proposal we've got, the payback was 4.1 years, and if we take into account the grant from the Green Business Fund, it went to 3.5 years. This led to save around 23% of electricity on site. So this delivered massive savings on site. So I just want to say for businesses that got an ESOS report, so first round of ESOS, and are yet to implement measures, they can be eligible for this type of support. Another case study is another hotel where we supported them implement a 50 kilowatt solar PV on the roof. It's around 40K project for a 50 kilowatt PV, so you can see that the unit cost of PV is quite acceptable at the moment. And in this case, as all the technical conditions in terms of south facing and north shaping were met, so the payback was extremely good if we consider even the capital contribution from the Green Business Fund. Sorry, we are looking at 5.9 years of payback with a 25% electricity consumption reduction at the structure. The last case study, it's actually Green Tourism Gold member that even though they have done very well to achieve the Gold membership, they benefit from the Green Business Fund support. So I personally did the energy audit on this structure, and we can see that there are even some other opportunity to save around 11% of the energy cost through a slightly better management of energy on site, through an upgrade of the lighting to LED, and through a potential upgrade of the cellar system, better, higher efficiency cellar unit. That, as I say, an 11% reduction in energy costs can make the difference. Now I want just to talk a bit about the Green Business Fund. The Green Business Fund is a scheme operated by the Carbon Trust to improve and deliver energy efficiency in the UK. The scheme runs in England, Scotland and Wales, and it's a combination of advice, training, and capital contribution for energy-saving equipment. The scope is obviously, it's been running in the UK, but it can be potentially expanded internationally in the future. And to qualify for the Green Business Fund, you have to be small and medium-sized businesses. You can be a school, a sole trader, and a charity. The scheme is not supporting domestic sector, public sector, and new buildings. And you have to meet 2 out of 3 of the following criteria. So no more than 250 employees, turnover not in excess of 25.9 million, and the annual balance should not be in excess of 12.9 million. And obviously the company has to be no more than 25% owned by another entity that does not meet the criteria. So now I think we are going to have around 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes Q&A. If you have got any questions, we are happy to answer. Have we got anyone?
Okay, so we've got the first question. Is the floor area measured internally by room or externally by footprint? The floor area for the building is based upon an external floor area. It should be easier for you to get a figure for that rather than measuring it each individual room. But the reason isn't just for ease. It also reflects the energy consumed to heat the building, because when you're heating the building, you do all the measures, all the benchmarks, all the tools relate to an external floor area. So that's what we use for measuring the floor area for the building itself. When you're looking at the meeting space, we work on an internal floor area because that's how you book out that meeting space, and that will be a certain proportion of the total floor area of the whole building. But that will be based upon, for example, the size of that meeting room. So, the overall building's floor area is external, and if you've got meeting rooms and things like that and want to have the meeting space area, that's based on internal. Hopefully that helps, Stuart. Yeah, we have a 2,400 square meter spa. How does this carbon calculator accommodate this area? Wouldn't it skew the data, the cost per bed night? Yes, it will have an effect. You do have a spa, and that is going to have an element of obviously energy reduced associated with running it. Unless it's submetered, you can't differentiate it out. You're probably best just to include it within your figures. But when you put in that based upon your accommodation, consider yourself more of a resort hotel rather than maybe a budget hotel. So think of it like that, because that gives slightly different benchmarks, takes account of the fact that you've got these things. The only thing I'd also add to that is every business has its own special features and something that makes them a bit unusual. The benchmarks are as a guide to help you on the journey to being lower and lower carbon. Your absolute best benchmark or best comparison is to compare against your own history and just keep building on positive directions. You don't have to be excellent in terms of your carbon footprint in order to get a gold award. You just need to be doing positive actions, and as long as you do those positive actions, you will get rewards in terms of our promotion and within the grading. But obviously, yeah, things like spas do have an energy consumption, and you can look at working to help reduce those temperatures and so on. Lots of tips and hints on temperature settings and ventilation controls and things like that. And yeah, keep in touch with us on that if there's any specific questions on that. But yes, you're right, it has an effect on your bed night figures.
Thank God, Stuart. I think this is for me. I don't have solar panels, but if I made the investment, the use is entirely self-consumption behind the meter. Heating pool, for example, how can that actually be measured in practice? Yeah, if you install solar panels, you can install a meter that actually measures how much energy is produced by your solar panels. So in that case, you can see how much energy you self-consume on site.
Yes, and of course also if you're looking at it from the purposes of benchmarking, comparing your annual consumption, if you generate some energy on site, whether it's through solar hot water or through solar PV, it reduces your overall consumption. So you are getting the benefit, even if you're not submetering it, you will see the benefit. If you're selling back to the grid through the feed-in tariffs or some of the other things like that, then that will be a figure that you'll get annually from the government based upon the size of the system you've got, and you can put that into the tool about how much you're exporting to the grid. So either way, you will be getting the benefit for that, and that's how we're going to get businesses or buildings to go from below 200 kilowatt hours per square meter down to 100 or even below 100, and that's by looking at these sorts of projects where renewables are sort of offsetting your other energy consumption. So it is accounted for within your building. So don't worry. Then we've got another question. Does the carbon calculator have an option for facilities such as museum, gallery? Yes, it does. We do have museums and galleries in there. The benchmarks are broadly the same as others in terms of these broad brush figures, and we have about I think about 50 or so museums in green tourism, so we do collect some good data on that, so we do have separate category for that. And the main things for measuring your carbon on that side is your carbon dioxide per square meter and your kilowatt hours per square meter. Those are the best tools to, and like I say, our toolkit helps you on that process. Do you recommend the carbon offset schemes only for event managers planning events or also for the venues themselves? What figure would you base the offset amount on? Good question, Michelle. At the moment, we're just doing this pilot with event managers and for events to look at their travel and so on for the places they stay in. If you as a venue wanted to be able to say, look, we offset all the carbon associated with our impacts, then I think it would be a good selling point. I think it has potential. It's not part of our tool at the moment, so you wouldn't be able to do it within our toolkit, but you could certainly, if you want to offset through a program that we're connected with, then obviously get in touch with us. There are other offset programs out there. You can find a project that you particularly like to do. For example, EICC work with, you'd have to send me an email, but they work with an offset company that's not the Woodland Trust, it's another one. But they do tree planting, and they offer it for events that are coming to the EICC. They don't do it for the whole venue. So I think you would have something of a unique selling point if you did do something like that for your overall consumption. So I would suggest use the carbon calculator to get your figure of how much carbon it is, and then investigate carbon offset options online, or contact us about how you might want to offset it. Like I say, one of our favourite projects is the work we're doing with this rainforest organisation, World Land Trust, because they do some super work all over the world. They have a project at the moment in Vietnam, restoring rainforest, which was damaged by you know, the Vietnam War and things like that. So a lot of positive projects in different parts of the world if you want to support them, or even think about things within your home destination as well.